I think it qualifies. It's October, it's spooky season, right? So this evening, I'd like us to engage in a bit of financial planning wizardry, a bit of magic together, if you'll permit the theme. We're going to take something that's invisible and make it visible using only data and research. We're going to open our eyes to a massive pool of existing and potential clients who are all around us and yet that most of us have never truly seen. Now, I like to call these people your PIN clients, like a cash point PIN, because first, you don't want to forget about them, and second, they are a secret code, I think, to business success today and tomorrow in financial planning. Now, we all know financial planning, wealth management, there's a lot going on, and it's increasingly competitive, right? Clients are splitting their business between more and more advisors. Robo-advice is set to make up about a fifth of the market by 2026. And there's other considerations too, right? SDR, things like decumulation, and the need for organic growth. So I think all that means any opportunity to grow and even strengthen a business just can't be ignored. So here's what we're going to do over the next, again, about 25 minutes. First, I'm going to perform my magic trick. We're going to take those invisible PIN clients and try and make them visible for us. And then I'm going to try and do one better than your standard street magician. I'm going to try and teach you some tricks of your own. Let's start with those crucial PIN clients. And last point, when we conclude, we'll do something that most maybe didn't think was possible. We'll reveal that all these things that are best for your business are also best for our precious, fragile planet. So that's our agenda. Let's start talking about PIN clients. Now, this pool of existing and potential clients, it may be massive, but it's easy to understand. All you have to remember are three things, and they just so happen to correspond to the letters P, I, and N. Isn't it funny how that works? Your PIN clients are, well, first of all, we're going to talk about how to retain PIN clients and attract them as well. So who are they? They're philanthropic, they are nature and climate conscious, and for the most part in financial planning, PIN clients are largely invisible within most conversations with clients. So I want to touch on all three of those topics together this evening very quickly. Let's start with the fact that PIN clients are philanthropic and largely invisible. Now, believe it or not, the UK public is remarkably generous, actually much more so than any other European country. 3/4 of us give to charity every single month. And there's been a lot of really interesting research, some by our guest Pro Bono Economics, some by CAF, who's in the room, and others, on the relationship for all this philanthropic interest to your clients. So 2/3 of high net worth individuals say that philanthropy is an important part of their life. 1/3 actively identify as philanthropists. And even in the affluent bracket, so the bracket right below that, about 1/3 plan to make a major gift to charity in the next 5 years. In the UK, perhaps it's not surprising, people want to be having conversations about this thing they care about with their trusted financial planner or wealth manager. 40% of UK millionaires agree. This is a US study which I find really fascinating. In the US, clients rated their professional advisor as the source from which they wanted philanthropy advice, second only to their spouse or partner. And that was above professional philanthropy advisors, people in the nonprofit world, and even other family members. And yet, here we come to the invisible part. So despite all this interest, this demand for help with philanthropy in the UK, clients really aren't getting it. This is a US study actually showing that about 87% of clients are looking for philanthropy advice, and yet in the US just 6% actually got it. Sometimes this is because those conversations don't even occur. This is UK research showing that less than 1/3 of advisors in the UK have an onboarding question for high net worth individuals about philanthropy in their fact finding. Barely 1/4 of high net worth individuals in the UK have ever been asked about charitable giving by their advisor, And actually, even though you might assume that ultra high net worth individuals have better resources in this space, maybe they're more satisfied, actually the research says often they're not. Less than 4% of ultra high net worth individuals said they're very satisfied with the philanthropy advice that they get. And I find this next part absolutely fascinating. So there's been a lot of research done recently on the subject of unconscious bias, the way in which advisor perceptions of clients' views on philanthropy are often very much at odds with clients' actual views on philanthropy. So let's take, for example, the question of who initiates conversations about philanthropy. Quite a few advisors say that they are the ones who initiate those conversations, about 39%. If you ask clients who initiates those conversations, it's only about 6% who say that the advisor is the one who initiates them. So something is not right there. Advisors are having a very different perception of those conversations. Even when those conversations occur, the content often, again, really misses the mark in terms of what clients are looking for from those conversations. Take, for example, a minority of advisors. If you ask them, do conversations about philanthropy mostly pertain to technical topics like tax? A minority of advisors would say, yes, they're mostly technical. If you ask the client that, a majority of clients, about 63%, say those conversations are mostly about technical issues. And some of this has to do with the fact that advisors rarely really understand the underlying cause of why a client wants to give money away. If you ask an advisor, why do your clients want to give money away? About 46% will say, well, it's mostly for tax reasons. If you ask clients that question, only about 16% say it's about tax reasons. So again, something is really off here in terms of perceptions. Let's look at this another way, not why clients want to give, but why clients might be hesitant to give. And actually, I think it's equally illuminating. So if you ask an advisor, why might your client be hesitant to give to charity? The top answers from advisors are typically around issues of wealth preservation. They think their clients don't have enough resources or feel they don't have enough resources to actually give the money away. If you ask clients that question, why might you be hesitant to give? The top answers are usually around lack of knowledge. So clients don't feel they have enough information about where donations go, what charities to support, etc. i.e., they need some help, right? So here's another gap in perceptions. Okay, we've talked about PIN clients being philanthropic and largely invisible. Let's talk now about the second key characteristic. PIN clients are nature and climate conscious, and yet again, in much of financial planning, still invisible to the industry. PIN clients want to protect and regenerate our planet first because many of us want to protect and regenerate our planet. Okay, so these are statistics from the UK. About 50% of us are more worried about climate change this year than we were last year. 84% of us want our government to be doing more on climate. And almost half say that climate has already affected the big decisions that they're making with their family, like where to live and work and what to buy. But PIN clients understand the particular power of their assets for doing something positive for the planet. They know they can deploy their wealth for people and planet. This information actually comes from last year's Good Money Week. It was a survey that was done with clients, and they found that climate change and the environment was the personal value that came out on top in terms of things that clients wanted to see reflected in their investments. And about half of clients said that advice on sustainability issues was important to them. Yet again, just as with philanthropy advice, despite this evident demand for doing something around sustainability as a part of financial planning, many of these clients are invisible. So less than a third of clients have even been made aware of environmentally sustainable products. And again, this is something that spans the wealth brackets. So ultra high net worth individuals are having concerns like this as well and are not as well resourced. 82% of ultra high net worth individuals in Europe, for example, are worried about making an investment that's greenwashed. They're not getting the advice to give them that confidence. So, are we feeling powerful? We've just made your PIN clients appear before our very eyes. Clients who are philanthropic, nature and climate conscious, and largely invisible in wealth management and financial planning. But I think once we sort of reveal these clients as a group, the question is, who are these clients? What do we actually see when we make them visible? I'd like to talk about two relevant characteristics of these clients that help us bring them to light a little bit more. First, your PIN clients are often younger. So they're often the children of existing clients, or they might be younger potential clients. For a bit of background, I think many in the room will be aware that we're in the middle of what's being called the Great Wealth Transfer in this country. So the movement of £5.5 trillion between generations by 2050. And for many advisors, this is a great positive opportunity, a time to retain family business, deepen existing relationships, and recruit new clients. But unfortunately, not all advisors are well prepared for the Great Wealth Transfer, and so for them, it can be an issue of anxiety, not a positive opportunity. We know that when somebody inherits money, about 70% of heirs will switch their financial advisor immediately. Quite a few advisors are aware of this, are worried about it, 63%, and yet barely a quarter of advisors have any plan for targeting the transfer of family wealth. So isn't it nice that we're talking about it this evening? Focusing on those PIN clients is a great way to turn this issue, this change in the market, from an anxiety into that opportunity that we talked about. On the philanthropic side, we know that talking about philanthropy is a great way to build relationships with the extended family. About 70% of advisors agree. On the sustainability side, we know that younger people are often very values-led, and talking about the planet, about sustainability, is a great way to build relationships with them. So millennials, younger clients, are twice as likely to select a wealth manager based on the range of sustainable products that they offer. Back on the charitable side, about 57% of millionaires, 18 to 34, want help with their charitable giving, so those younger high net worth clients. And yet, almost 9 in 10 advisors have no differentiated sales and marketing strategy for talking to younger investors. So that's the first element of your PIN clients, often younger clients. The second relevant characteristic, they're often women. And for a bit of context again, in terms of market change, women in the UK, many in the room will know, are set to control about 60% of wealth in the country by next year, by 2025. Once again, this can be a great opportunity for wealth managers to be aware of this change, but for many, it's a source of anxiety. So about 70% of women who are widowed, we know, change their advisor if they're widowed. As of the last census, there were 2.2 million widows in the UK. Yet again, about 90% of advisors have no differentiated sales and marketing strategy for talking to women clients. And this is a shame because the research says women have well-defined and different priorities in many cases when it comes to philanthropy and sustainability compared to men. So women are much more likely to involve their children in financial planning, in conversations about philanthropy. On the philanthropy side, they're more likely to prefer regular, well-researched, longer-term charitable donations as opposed to a big one-off donation. That means they're more likely to want advice. That's the kind of donation that really needs some good advice. And women often care about sustainability. About 80% of women want their investments to be environmentally sustainable, and yet this statistic really shocks me. About 9 in 10 said 9 in 10 women have never been asked about sustainable products by their advisor. Unsurprisingly, perhaps this leads many women to feel ignored or unseen by the industry. A third of women in the UK say that they've been patronized by the financial services industry. So we've revealed our PIN clients, and we've shown that there are clients out there who want to be talking with their advisors about philanthropy and our planet. But I think this maybe begs two important follow-up questions. If PIN clients are existing clients, how do you satisfy them? How do you keep them as part of your practice? If they are potential clients, how do you impress and attract those PIN clients? And that brings us to our long-awaited Sorcerer's Apprentice moment. In the rest of our time this evening, or at least my time, I'd like to talk about how to impress and attract those crucial PIN clients. And actually, it all boils down to a single, simple concept: green philanthropy, or environmental philanthropy. Let me break this into 3 parts. What do I mean by green philanthropy? Why is this effective for getting to those PIN clients? And how can this actually be implemented into your practice? So, what is green philanthropy? It's pretty simple. I'm talking about introducing your clients to climate and nature charities. What are these organizations? Well, they're the not-for-profits on the front lines of the efforts to combat climate change and global biodiversity loss. The not-for-profits with the skills, strategies, and networks to deliver real impact at speed and scale. These are organizations protecting rainforests and restoring degraded land, setting up marine protected areas and protecting marine biodiversity, enforcing environmental law, or focusing on deforestation embedded in our supply chains, those really tricky issues. And frankly, these are organizations we should all be thinking about and talking about all the time. Because in a world of pessimism and anxiety, charities like these are giving real reasons for excitement and optimism. This is a graph thinking about both the speed of climate action, the y-axis, but also the scale of climate action. How can we act quickly and effectively to deal with this issue? And when you put things into that perspective, a lot of the solutions we think most often about aren't enough on their own. So governments are important, but they're too slow. Innovative technologies on climate will be really important, but again, slow to scale. And sustainable investing is important, but we know it's hindered by greenwash. And so philanthropy is a missing puzzle piece. Philanthropy can act at the speed and scale we need to make a difference, especially in what scientists call a decisive decade for our planet. And the last point on this slide, I know many in the room will care quite a bit about sustainable investing or impact investing and want to make sure that it is doing as much as it possibly can for our planet. And we see green philanthropy as a complete complement to sustainable investing, because the reality is these things that climate and nature charities do, in many cases, it's tough to financialize them, right? It's hard to get a financial return from them. And so even the best investment product, the best market mechanism, will have trouble reaching them. That's why green philanthropy is a great complement to any sustainable investing somebody's doing. And yet, these charities are critically underfunded. Less than 2% of global philanthropic giving goes to climate mitigation efforts. It's particularly striking given that demand for philanthropy and given the importance of these charities, because green philanthropy undergirds all the other philanthropic goals that we or clients will care about. As Christiana Figueres says, she's the former executive secretary of the UNFCCC, she says, if we don't address climate change in a timely manner, it just doesn't really matter what we do on health, on human rights, or education, because destruction on the planet will be so severe that everything else will fall by the wayside. So, part 2 here, why is green philanthropy effective for getting to those crucial PIN clients? The quick summary is that it is a good business decision. This is not about deliberately lowering AUM and suffering as a business as a result. The research says offering philanthropy is good for business. So the statistics on screen come from a comparison done in the US of firms that offered philanthropy advice to those that didn't offer philanthropy advice. Firms that did were found to have 3 times the median organic growth, higher investment levels per customer, and 6 times the median assets that they were working with. And this just makes sense, right? Talking about philanthropy is a way of building trust. It's a way of deepening relationships with clients. Sometimes advisors will ask me, well, isn't talking about philanthropy risky? Might I touch on a difficult subject with a client? Could it hurt my relationship with that client? And the reality is, again, the research says that's not the case. When you talk about philanthropy, the research says it's more likely to benefit that relationship with a client rather than jeopardizing it. And in that study I just cited, firms that offered philanthropy had higher levels of customer satisfaction compared to those that didn't. And now we come to the third and final part of my magic lesson for you all this evening. And at this point, I'm using my wizardly powers to read some minds in the room, and perhaps people are thinking, this might sound good, might make sense, but where would I start? Right? I'm not an expert in this space, and there are thousands of charities out there. How would I actually act on this information? And that brings me to some good news. There are now some organizations out there that let you outsource your green philanthropy offering for clients. They do the hard work of selecting and assessing climate and nature charities. They give you the resources and the training to get this in front of clients in a way you can feel comfortable with. And they do events and impact reporting to keep clients happy in the long term. Now, some of those organizations will charge for their services for outsourcing philanthropy, and that is absolutely fine, right? This evening I want to talk about one organization that does this work that doesn't charge because it's a good case study for thinking about how this can be done. And some will know I'm talking about the charity I'm very privileged to be a part of, which is the Global Returns Project. So we're trying to make it easy for advisors to offer green philanthropy and be a conduit for client funds to create climate and nature charities. Again, this is about providing a case study. I'm not interested in making a sales pitch. Our costs as a charity are funded totally separately by our trustees and some trusts, foundations, and individual donors. So this is really thinking about how can this be done in a simple and easy way. Let me be transparent about what I would like from this evening, which is I'd like to keep up the conversation with as many people in the room as I can. And I'd like to talk about how to normalize green philanthropy in your practice, and if you're already working with us, how to get this in front of clients and do more. Anyone can scan the QR code on the screen or get in touch and on LinkedIn or any other way. Would love to keep up the conversation. And just as an added bit, anyone who does set up one of those meetings to talk more about these issues will send a free copy of a new material that we put together, which we call the Advisor's Guide to Climate and Nature Philanthropy. That's a comprehensive 70-page resource material for advisors to get all this information, and it's easily indexed so that it's referenceable with clients. So, on to a case study, the Global Returns Project. We are a UK charity, as I mentioned. We launched in October 2020, and we've seen some really exciting growth over the past couple of years, which indicates to us that green philanthropy is here to stay in this industry. We launched in October 2020, and as I said, we've seen some really exciting growth. Last year, we doubled what we raised for the charities that we support compared to the previous year. We're now working with about 37 institutions across wealth management, fund management, and other corporates. These are some of the client-facing firms that we work with, again, helping them offer green philanthropy to their clients as a normal part of their processes. Now, we were set up in part by a former fund manager, and that fund management approach to the way we do things has become embedded in our processes. For us, that means trying to take some of the basic principles of good investing, so diversification, doing rigorous research, expecting regular performance reporting, and we're trying to apply those principles to the world of charitable giving, where sometimes those principles are applied, but rarely altogether. We call that a portfolio approach to charitable giving, and that means that we're trying to assemble a diverse portfolio of high-impact climate and nature charities. What kinds of organizations do we support? Well, we say they're high impact because they've all been screened to be scalable, they're best in class in their particular sector, but really important to our model is that we're, at least in our early days, we say we're looking for blue chip equivalents in the charity space. So these are organizations that are low risk from a donor perspective, they've been screened for strong governance, and from a philanthropic perspective, it's a diversified selection of charities. We have a team of world-class climate scientists who work with our trustees to oversee selection and assessment of these charities. This is the technical advisory board on the screen now. They're all leading experts in things like atmospheric physics, land use, ocean ecosystems, and more. And they do that work with a proprietary methodology that they've helped us put together. We've taken thousands of charities all around the world and whittled them down to 6 that we've started selecting now. We do plan to add to that portfolio as we grow and as our advisors advise us further. Our basic process, if we're looking at a charity and thinking about adding it to our portfolio, first it has to pass a series of governance and sizing gates. So that's that low risk point I made before. The organization needs to be a certain size, age, income threshold, etc. If it passes those gates, then we score it by the rest of our methodology, by its impact, the scalability of its operations, the networks it forms, and the co-benefits it delivers. And for us, only the highest scoring organization in a particular sector gets admitted to the portfolio. After that, a really important part of our process is we're not done there. Every 6 months, we rescore all the organizations we've selected. We produce detailed impact reports every 6 months for all our donors. And if we find that a charity, perhaps their strategy has shifted since they've been entered into the portfolio, perhaps we find an even higher performing organization, we will consider removing a charity and replacing it with that higher performing organization. These are the 6 charities we currently support. Again, we plan to add to the portfolio. These are not the only great charities out there, but they're ones that we feel really comfortable standing behind. And again, the emphasis broadly is on diversification within this space. So we have Blue Marine Foundation dealing with blue carbon, ocean protection, Client Earth, a team of amazing environmental lawyers, Global Canopy using data tools to shine a light on deforestation in our supply chains, Rainforest Trust protecting threatened rainforest, Trillion Trees as a complement restoring degraded forest land around the world, and Whale and Dolphin Conservation doing what it says on the tin and doing it really well. Whales have been found to have a really interesting role in ocean carbon cycles. We've tried to make this as easy for clients as possible. So if an individual donates, it comes to us and we distribute 100% to the charities that they want to support without any deductions whatsoever. Actually, we absorb any transaction fees. So 100% in is truly 100% out. If a client wants to support just one of the charities or a few of them, they can absolutely do that, but a standard donation gets split equally among the charities we've selected. If a client wants to be directly introduced to the charities, we can facilitate that as well, and the client can still work with us. Over our time together, we have revealed your paying clients, individuals who are philanthropic, nature and climate conscious, and largely invisible in financial planning. We've talked about how to retain and attract those clients using a particularly simple tool, which is green philanthropy. And we've used the Global Returns Project as a bit of a case study for thinking about how this can be normalized in an industry that has very little time for doing things that are so outside the norm. At the start, I mentioned that we'd conclude by doing something that people don't think is possible, which is revealing that all these things that are best for business are also best for the planet that we all care about. So let me just conclude by saying this. In the face of the climate crisis, it's easy to feel powerless, right? But you're not. You and your clients have power when you give power to the best organizations. When you give, full stop. Philanthropy is the gift of power. And if you care about these issues, please talk to us about normalizing green philanthropy in your practice. If you care about these issues, please, let's keep up the conversation. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte. I'm from Pro Bono Economics. So Pro Bono Economics is a think tank and charity that basically looks at empowering the social sector and promotes well-being across the UK using economics We basically work with charities to basically do systemic policy research to drive change. We work with small to medium-sized charities, basically help them articulate their impact. And as part of the charity side of the work we do is, bring volunteer economists together with charities so that they can highlight their impact to public and the public and policymakers. On the kind of philanthropic side of things, so a couple of years ago we did a programme called the Law Family Commission, which basically looked at the connection between the charity sector and different parts of society, so business, government, etc. And within that, one of the areas that we kind of really targeted was the philanthropy area, so pushing that kind of philanthropic conversation, getting it to be part of the government conversation, getting government to care about it. We've just been at a conference where I've been to 3 conferences recently, Lib Dems, Conservatives and Labour, and we have hosted 3 panels there where we have basically been pushing the philanthropy agenda there as well. But recently we've kind of a lot of the research has been shown on the screen there, but we've done 2 reports recently, one looking at the younger generation of philanthropists and how that's a really untapped market for people, and also looking at why we think it's a really good idea for financial advisors to include it within their offering to their clients. And I'll leave that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Roy Coulson from Ativo, head of proposition. For us, philanthropy plays a part of kind of normalising. We want to offer the full spectrum of investment to clients, so going from that investment-led all the way through to that philanthropic side. And we want to normalise it. We want to make it part of everyday conversations, and we really want it to be part of those conversations that you have with clients, and education needs to be a part of that. I think we've seen from what Jack has said that there is demand. These clients are invisible. How do you unearth that? And that's something that we're really keen on doing ourselves at Ativo.
Right. So my name is George King. I'm with Masego Private Wealth, so also a wealth manager. Probably has nothing to do with the reason that I'm here. So I've been involved in this broader effort to ensure that philanthropy advice is broadly and systematically incorporated into the advice proposition of wealth managers for over a decade, going back to when I was at RBC, helping to build the wealth management business there. And the concept for me essentially is that the idea that you can be an advisor to wealth holders and be talking about tax, or be talking about cash flows, and not be talking about any other capital allocation that's relevant to the client that might be philanthropic is insane. And so I've had conversations for a decade with regulators, with industry bodies, with other wealth managers around that proposition. And so we'll probably have a lot of conversations around the requirement and the imperative to incorporate philanthropy advice in advising wealth holders.
Great, thank you. Let's see if this mic works over here. I want to go back to Charlotte, actually, to you. In our conversation this evening, we focused on the fact that green philanthropy is a particularly powerful tool for addressing, this demand, this dual demand between charitable advice and talking about sustainability. And I'd like to sort of dig into both of those sides very quickly. So, Charlotte, first, how do you see green philanthropy supporting the other charitable goals that a client might have?
So I think green philanthropy really kind of supports nature charities, and we kind of can complement the clients like other charitable goals as well, kind of beyond just the environmental challenges. So I think it's really interconnected with social issues such as health, homelessness and poverty. I think by kind of contributing to the climate action, clients can kind of help mitigate these other crises with aligning this kind of philanthropy agenda with other areas. But I think there's a real kind of versatility with the environmental causes that is maybe kind of quite an attractive option for clients as well. Especially kind of, we've mentioned the youth clients as well. I think that's kind of an area where it can be really kind of pushed. It creates kind of a sustainable future as well for the next generation. whilst also kind of focusing on health and supporting kind of like nature-based interventions. So, through improving nature, etc., you're improving the opportunities for children to be out in the environment, how do they improve their mental well-being through that space as well. But I think by kind of just introducing clients to those client-based related causes will enhance their kind of engagement in other philanthropic areas as well. I think there's an interconnected help that can come from positioning green philanthropy as like the main area, but then using that to kind of tell them about how they can go about kind of achieving more long-term societal changes that maybe they have another interest in as well. But I think it's a good kind of area, especially like targeting some of those younger clients as well.
Great, thank you. Now I want to go to George for the other side of that. George, how do you see green philanthropy fitting into conversations perhaps about the spectrum of capital, which you've just touched on? How can it be a complement to conversations about sustainable funds?
Yeah, so let me tell a quick story to sort of try and bring this to life. When we first started to look at implementing a sustainable investing option, this is an area that's ripe with all sorts of issues. That's not the topic for this conversation. But the landing point that we came to was, look, we can't have 50,000 different products. We can't actually cater to everyone's particular values and incorporate that into their portfolios. The products aren't there, our capabilities aren't there, all sorts of impediments. What is universally true is the environment and the climate affects everybody. That's universal. So as a starting point, the first conversation we have about sustainable investing is, look, the products are imperfect, the verbiage is imperfect, our knowledge is imperfect, your interest is imperfect. All of this is imperfect and forming and will change over time. But the starting point today is around climate change, it's around global climate environmental issues. So if you tell me that you have any interest in understanding the impact of your capital as investments and the impact it's having, the first thing we're going to do is put you in a sustainable portfolio, which is a climate-focused tilt. So that and that's what we've done, that's what we've implemented. And so the philanthropy conversation is essentially a complete parallel with that. First of all, we should be led by us, right? So the clients may ask, but we should be asking them, hey, what do you want to do? Do you care? Are you interested, et cetera? Can we help teach you about what this all means, what the terminology is, what the taxes are, what the structures are, right? That's our role. And then when they get to the point of actually, okay, here are the things I care about. And you ask the question, are you doing this because someone asked you? Are you doing this because you just have in the past? Are you doing this because you care about it? You have that. But the starting point is, while you develop all of that, if you have some sense that you have more capital needed in your lifetime and you want to start to do something positive with outside of your family, the starting point is going to be green philanthropy, climate change, environmental philanthropy. That's where we're going to start. And we can either build on top of that as you add other personal things or whatever. But that's the starting point.
Thanks, George. I want to go to Roy now. Roy, I know you just mentioned that TiVo has incorporated taking philanthropy seriously, and I know they've incorporated green philanthropy into your sustainable panel for clients. Obviously, the firm feels this is the right thing to do, but I'd be really interested in knowing a little more about why TiVo decided to do this from a business perspective, from a commercial perspective.
Okay. I think, look, you're absolutely correct. It's the right thing to do. You've asked me about commerciality, so I'm going to go to that. I'm going to caveat my answers. I don't caveat absolutely everything about it. So, yes, it's the right thing to do. Absolutely everything we do has to be correct for the client. That said, it's not about TiVo's bottom line, okay? But to answer your question, I think succinctly, you've got to bust a few myths, and I think you've obviously started speaking about those a little bit. And I think you have to bust a few myths first. And those myths are that clients giving money away is taking away fee-paying assets, okay? That's simply not true. It isn't assets walking out the door. I think we've seen some of that evidence already. You would never advise clients, of course, to gift money that they can't afford. And that's what we're talking about here. Compliance gets in the way. I've seen George speak on this a number of times. There's always that excuse that compliance gets in the way. Really isn't. You're giving financial planning, you're giving advice on tax, and essentially it forms part of that. Your lifestyle financial planners in some cases, and again, it can form part of that. I think the I am not a specialist comes into it. One, it's a really interesting subject. So you read a few things, you read some of the great collateral from Global Returns Project, you quickly become quite knowledgeable about some of these areas. But you also outsource it. You're a specialist in financial planning in kind of my world as a TiVo, and that's what you're doing. You then can outsource that specialism to somebody selecting the charities that have that green philanthropic approach that you want to. So I think once you banish those myths, you're really in a place where you can bring green philanthropy into your world. And look, I think we've seen a few things that have clearly kind of evidenced that the demand is there. How do you unearth that demand? And it is possible. I think just a small percentage of a contribution or cash can really help that conversation. You're speaking to clients about things that they really care about. Charitable giving is disarming. It's not a conversation that's something, I don't know, difficult. It's not a pension transfer. It's something that people care about and are passionate about. And I think, unlike investments, if you sit down and have dinner, you don't talk with your friends. Certainly I don't. You don't sit down and talk with your friends about, oh, my investments have gone up, or my financial advisors just recommended UF Plus to me. No, we're British. We sit down, we talk about the weather. We talk about the dolphins that have died in the Thames recently, how many butterflies we haven't seen this summer. And that's what we talk about. So you've got these things starting to happen, and look, it's a no-brainer. You've got clients that trust you. You've got soft facts. You've unearthed these delicious soft facts that we all really want from our clients, and things that we're looking to unearth. How can we really help these clients? And I think the next thing is you've got free referrals. You've got people sitting at dinner talking about how they're saving the world. And it just becomes commercial off its own back. So not only, I think, is it the right thing to do, it is commercial, and we're seeing evidence of that. And I think even if it wasn't the right thing to do, it's got its own commercial argument.
Can I add to the commerciality thing just for a second? I mean, anybody that has really understood how wealth businesses work, understand that the present value of a wealth business is the forward future cash flows discounted back, which means time is what drives the value of the wealth business. What drives keeping those assets for a long period of time? You remain relevant to that client and have important conversations with that client over time. So in the first couple of years, you've solved some problem, you've done some investing, you've got their will in place, that's great. What are you going to have? What are you going to say in year 5, in year 10, year 10? If you're not having these kind of conversations, you're not extending the longevity of a relevant conversation with those clients. And the 3 million or 2 million or 500 grand they started with, as that grows, now what? What are you going to talk about? How do you continue to have relevant conversations? And then you start to talk to their young children, or the spouses, or the broader family. This is one of the most important topics to bring wealth conversations together in a way that's still Britishly compliant and not talking about money, but still talking about things that are values and family and so forth. The commerciality of this, though it's hard to show because it's about future cash flows discounted back, if you really understand the business, it's very compelling.
Thanks, George and Roy. I'm going to go right back to you, actually. I know that we touched on it in the presentation. There's a lot of competing priorities going on for financial planners and wealth managers right now. Questions about SDR. I know a lot of people in the room are thinking about legislative uncertainty, organic growth, all those things that were mentioned. And I just wonder, given some of the statistics we've talked about this evening, are there ways for green philanthropy to be a way to tackle some of those competing priorities? Does it deserve the space in the conversation, I guess?
Tell me which competing priorities you're referring to.
I think any of the ones we've talked about. I mean, organic growth is something that comes up quite a bit in conversations with advisors that we have, at least. I don't know if that resonates with you all.
And was that for me or? Okay, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can do. I think look, SDR, so something you've touched on. It gets pushed back a little bit, okay, and we all want to advise clients on something good, and we want to bring this kind of into our world. But where there's potential changes afoot, that kind of limits you. The last thing you want to do is recommend something to a client and then scale back on it or change what you're doing. And I think SDR has the potential to do that in sustainable. Charitable giving, it doesn't really have that. In the UK, I think we've said, look, we're fundamentally good people. We are looking to kind of make these charitable donations. And I think we understand certain things. We understand the world needs our help. We know that there's demand for these areas, and we know that it's tax advantageous. So these are things we can tackle now. And then I think if we loop back to what George just said, that it's conversations you can keep having. They're very repeatable conversations, and it's things you can do to address legislation now. So not just legislation in the financial advice world. I saw something from Client Earth today about some of the bigger supermarkets we use, and 70% I think of their recycled plastic is actually just being burnt. Okay, they're claiming they're recycling it. And Client Earth, on the charities, of course, in your portfolio, are looking to address this. And these are things that are on our doorstep, things that people care about. And look, the UK is a leader in it, and I think the UK will continue to be a leader in this area. We led the Industrial Revolution. This week we've turned off the coal plant. We're the first G7 country that's done that, and I think the UK will support that. So amongst all the mist of these priorities, these competing priorities, this is a fairly constant that you can continue to have conversations with. And as George said, it's a repeatable, it's a growing conversation. It's really interesting.
And just to add to that, from a sort of a business perspective and from a sort of individual wealth manager perspective around competing priorities, so it's impossible, right? None of us have enough time. We have too much admin, we have too much regulatory tick boxing, we have CPD, we have to do new suitability rules and SDR. It's impossible, right? We have to have compliant conversations with clients on a constant basis, and we have to go do new business development, and we have to, right? So the competing for advisor time in a wealth business, how time gets allocated, it's horrendous, right? We don't have enough time to actually talk to clients and actually ask them how they're doing and have relevant client conversations. And at the end of the day, with your interactions with clients, the end goal has to be they felt that there was something worthwhile and meaningful for them. They don't really care that you have all this stuff you have to do to be compliant with your business or with the regulator. They care, the reason they're with you is what's relevant and important for me. So philanthropy conversations, and specifically green philanthropy conversations, climate-based, planet-based conversations, is never going to not sound like it's a relevant, meaningful, important conversation to them. So you have to, even if it's small, right? It's 3 minutes at the end, the beginning of the meeting, having that as part of the engagement, is an important component to make sure that those competing priorities don't squeeze out what's important, which is engaging in a meaningful way with the client.
Thanks so much. And I want to give the last comment to Charlotte. Obviously, there's a lot of interesting statistics we've talked about this evening. Are there any relevant figures from Pro Bono's work that haven't been discussed this evening that you think are important?
Okay.
Yeah, get in there.
I think I was looking and I was like, oh, he's taking all my facts and research. So, but I would like to give a nod to CAF and NCBO actually, because charitable giving on a whole is going down, and I think whilst the number is going up with the public, the actual kind of population size of people giving is going down. And some of the space that we've looked at is that basically if you ask, people are 40% more likely to give philanthropically. So I think just having that question, I know we keep adding to the list of things that we're asking people to do, but I think there's so much potential there and so much good that can kind of come from it as well. I think it's really important as well, and even within business sector as well, the amount of money being given by businesses is now going down as well. So, not looking just at clients as well, but your business partners, they are kind of reducing the amount of giving that's going on in that space as well. And a lot of charities are at crisis points at the moment. So we're kind of constantly seeing charities having to kind of step in your local kind of authority space and having to be that kind of delivery partner for your local authorities. And there's not enough funding there to keep them going. So philanthropy really has like a massive, huge part to play in keeping the kind of charity sector going, keeping civil society going, and kind of without the good that is done by philanthropy, like that it just like won't continue. So I think it's really amazing whenever we do see examples of that. And I think having the government kind of respect and appreciate philanthropy more is really important to us. And we would like to see like a philanthropy champion within government. We would like to see DCMS create a new philanthropy strategy so that, you know, we're making sure that this is engaged, but also that philanthropists are celebrated as well. Because I think there is sometimes, you know, this idea that philanthropists always want a plaque or they have like a big ego attached to themselves whenever they're donating. But a lot of them do it because it's good, but also they deserve to be celebrated as well. So I think if we can kind of, you know, continue to make sure that when we're asking them, you know, these people are doing something good, so it's worth celebrating these people. So I don't think it's always just about like the plaques or the egos that go with it. I think it's also about, you know, appreciating those people and, you know, someone who wants to give for good is a good person.
Well, thank you all so much. Instead of doing the Q&A, what I'm going to suggest is that everyone who wants to ask questions come and find our panelists or find a member of the GRP team. You can find us with our lanyards. Anyone with a lanyard can answer all sorts of difficult questions. And I'd like everybody to first give our panel another round of applause. Thank you again for being here, and please enjoy the drinks and the food as well. Thanks so much.